Walk with me. Say you are a young teenage girl who has seen a handful of anime and is eager to see more. You've seen some really good ones and some really bad ones. You're already familiar with the sports genre, so you've been seeking those out when you find them. You try a show about basketball, a sport you've played, but it seems a little too over the top, so you look for something else. Then you see a show about volleyball, a sport you're less acquainted with, but the first episode is incredibly promising, with characters in a style that immediately draws you in. You start up episode 2, and about 15 minutes in, this happens.
そこ、どうしてくれる?
Cool. Despite how much it annoys you to meet this character's ass before you see her face, you keep watching and eventually the show becomes one of your all-time favorites. It occupies about 60% of the total space in your brain from 2014 to 2018. And oddly enough, it never does anything as gratuitous as that character's introduction again. But it still struggles with her characterization, even as other developed and interesting female characters emerge. And so, nearly a decade since you first watched the show, you sit down to ask yourself, do the female characters in Haikyu work? The answer? Kind of. The Haikyu girls are, for the most part, good. And I like them. But I didn't really like them much until season 2, when we meet Yachi. Because Yachi and the rest of the female characters after her introduction begin to have a real, meaningful place in the broader story. But what do I mean by that? Fundamentally, when I'm watching a shonen show that I know is explicitly appealing to guys, I am prepared for the reality that 9 times out of 10, the series is going to focus on male leads. If you're lucky, maybe there's a girl in the series' main trio. But quality matters more than quantity. Women don't have to be the center of a story to have agency in it. As I talked about with My Hero Academia, you can have great moments with female characters and still make them feel unimportant to your story by sidelining them and constantly using the male gaze to reduce them to objects. So, how does Haikyu make Yachi, Kiyoko, and other female characters have agency within the story? And how does it avoid the male gaze? And when it fails to do the girls justice, how does it fail? Let's start by looking at Season 1, the pre-Yachi era, where I'd argue there's not as much to engage with in terms of the girls in the series. The 2 girls we spend significant amounts of times with are Karasuno boys volleyball manager Shimizu Kiyoko and Karasuno girls volleyball captain Michimiya Yui. Yui is the better developed of the 2 in Season 1, I'd argue, although her arc is a fairly brief one at the start of the Inter-High. There's a theme throughout the series of journeys, of the way your course can change or end in ways you don't expect, and how any one ending or loss doesn't invalidate your path, doesn't lessen your part in the story. This is encapsulated as Yui and an old friend of Daichi's both lose in the first round of the Inter-High. They speak about it in a very meta monologue. They lost, they knew they could have worked harder and perhaps made it farther, but regardless, they are still part of this story. They are still a part of volleyball. They are still a part of Haikyu, which, of course, literally means volleyball in Japanese. We see glimpses of Yui training with the girls' team, and it's clear they aren't as dedicated as the boys' team. However, Yui is still passionate about the sport and about going all out to win at the Inter-High, in contrast to all the other girls in the squad who operate from a rather pessimistic position about their odds. Yui has a habit of slapping her face to focus and constantly revs up her team. She seems remarkably strong the entire time, even after they lose. She confronts a sobbing underclassman by telling her that it wasn't her fault they lost, that volleyball is about keeping the ball in play, and the other team was better at it. She holds a calm front until she heads off on her own away from the team and breaks down. Because, just like everyone else, actually more than everyone else, it hurts to lose. She was the one encouraging everyone to fight like they're going to win, telling them they should really try and to not give up before they've begun, that they need to win. So, to lose is devastating to her, who really wanted to win, maybe more than anybody on her team. Outside of the central cast, most of the characters don't have long, ongoing arcs, with a few exceptions. Usually, rival teams and characters will get a mini-arc, like a couple episodes where we see a snapshot into their life. Series like this often show a character's backstory, and we're forced to realize that, of course, this character is far more complex than we could see from one perspective. But Haikyu again and again explores different side characters to reveal just how many journeys and stories are happening alongside Hinata and Karasuno's story. Everyone is at the center of their own story. My video on Hana Misaki of Jozenji is basically a love letter to how much I enjoy this kind of storytelling, where truly everyone who wanders through this story feels important and fully realized that they are the protagonist of their own story. It just doesn't happen to be the one we're watching. Even if her time was short, Michimiya Yui was a part of volleyball too. Then there's Kiyoko. I didn't really like Kiyoko much in season 1. The first time she shows up, we get a butt and a boob shot before her face, as I famously declared in my first ever YouTube video on this channel, and it seems pretty clear she's just here for the boys to admire. In the first season, the most character we get from her is her turning down Tanaka and Nishinoya's advances, and a rather nice moment where she unfurls the Karasuno fly banner, and wishes the team good luck, which sends all the second and third years into tears. Now, to Haikyuu's credit, the boob and butt shot is not as weird as a lot of stuff you'll see in anime, because it is 1, brief, and 2, not repeated. It's likely from the perspective of Hinata and possibly Kageyama, who are taking in Kiyoko for the first time. Teenage boys notice her body first, which is probably accurate to how teenage boys perceive a pretty upperclassman girl. The little blush lines on Hinata's face seem to emphasize how he's disarmed by her beauty, and he becomes visibly flustered after the gym door shuts. But this is not how Kiyoko is constantly presented. Kiyoko is not objectified in this way again. She is shown in similar glowy, sparkly frames, but it's her face or her whole person, not just parts of her body being highlighted. This is a key difference from shows where the male characters again and again fixate on parts of the girls' bodies, their breasts and their butt. Yes, some of the guys like Kiyoko and are into her beauty being her central appeal, but she is not reduced to parts of her body. When we think about girls being presented as sexual objects, that constant framing of them as their bodies is the issue, not a passing or brief moment which feels more true to teenage boy perception. Really, in all, the boob and the butt shot feels like a fan service blip in a show that otherwise approaches Kiyoko's beauty in a holistic way. For me, when I first started the show back in 2014, I did not know this was a blip, and I was immediately a little put off, like, great, another show where we just oogle the only girl. But it's not reflective of the show as a whole, which made me wonder why it's even there, which led me to check back with the manga and discover perhaps the most telling thing of all about the scene. It is an anime-only moment. Production IG, what are you doing? Why add this? In the manga, Kiyoko doesn't meet Hinata and Kageyama until chapter 5, right before the 3v3 match starts. Hinata is like, hee, there's a pretty girl over there, look, Kageyama. Who doesn't care at all, by the way, which cracks me up, and then the manga moves on, no fixating on her butt and boobs. Continuing on from this, I don't think most of Karasuno sees Kiyoko as a sexual object. Tanaka and Nishinoya being the main exceptions as they are actively attracted and interested in her. Even then, it's not usually parts of her body so much as her generally being shown as gorgeous and how they are hopelessly in love with her. They have their teenage boy moments, such as when they want her to say the word spank or fawn over her, but it's not intensely sexualizing. Tanaka and Nishinoya's advances are consistent, but not so constant that it's their only defining personality trait. Tanaka is like, "Can I carry your bag for you? You look beautiful today." Which is like overbearing, but not creepy. Most of their admiration feels slapstick. As someone who has known teenage boys, it feels a lot more realistic and normal to horny dudes than Minata's restraining order behavior from MHA, for example. Inashida has an insightful line way later in the show in season 4, where he says, "Tanaka's pretty receptive of people's feelings, so if Shimizu told him to stop, he'd probably stop." And I think that's the prevailing sense behind all the fan-servicey, Kiyoko-licious moments. Like, if at any moment she was uncomfortable with their behavior, she'd tell them to stop, and they would stop. There's actually a scene with Kiyoko where 2 guys from Jozenji hit on her in season 2. She's clearly uncomfortable but unable to get away from them, and Hinata goes over to stop them from bothering her. He intervenes several times when they refuse to let up. I at least have a prevailing sense that any of the guys on Karasuno would step in if Kiyoko was being harassed. Tanaka and Nishinoya might murder the guy, but they would defend her too. And if she told them to stop, that enough was enough and it made her uncomfortable, I think they would stop. Maybe she just finds their interests somewhat entertaining, or she's unbothered with their antics, but she doesn't ask them to stop, and as a viewer, I never felt like they did something that crossed any lines. This is a fundamental difference from something like MHA, where you know Mineta would not stop pursuing a girl because he has been told to stop before and he still acts the same way. I think it's something you can feel within a show. Judging intentions is tricky, but I feel the intention for Haikyu is firmly in the right place of being accurate to teenage boys' romantic impulses without violating the comfort of the teenage girls. And guys are gonna be into girls for their looks, they're gonna think about their bodies. That's life. But you can't call it humor to have the guys objectify the girls when it's 1, super uncomfortable, 2, not funny, and 3, the only purpose the girls serve. So, I don't think Haikyu fails 1. It's not uncomfortable. Again, the prevailing sense is that this character could shut it down and it doesn't bother her. Doesn't fail 2 either. I think Nishinoya and Tanaka are often kind of funny with their devotion. But in the first season, I thought 3 was true. What is Kiyoko there to do other than to be pretty motivation for the team sometimes? She's functionally an attractive object. Does she have anything going on in her own life? It doesn't seem like it. This ties back to the male gaze. Last video, I didn't elaborate on the definition of the male gaze much, that women in art are portrayed as sexual objects for the pleasure of a presumed heterosexual male audience. I want to expand a little bit on that here, because the male gaze is specifically about how cinema constructs the relationship between audience and subject. The male gaze presumes that men are the viewers, that men are relatable and understandable subjects, while women are reduced and distanced as objects rather than subjects, denied the interiority of men through tools like sexualization and voyeurism. Women are to be looked at, not to be understood. John Berger originated the concept, later expanded by Laura Mulvey, and other scholars have since elaborated and challenged it. Bell Hooks famously wrote about the oppositional gaze, how black women were not included in the women to be looked at category by Hollywood, and how feminist film theory was solely focused on representations of white women. Others looked to the conception of a female gaze, while some have looked at queerness in this dynamic between spectator and subject, the idea of a lesbian gaze. The male gaze is an interesting, useful concept, but it's not the be-all, end-all of feminist media theory. It's really a jumping-off point. It's also based in Hollywood and American cinema and media, which obviously is not the same cultural context as Japanese works like Haikyuu or MHA. But I still find it useful for looking at the often blatantly misogynistic presentation of women in anime, especially shonen anime. Are female characters being sexualized and relegated as a way to reduce their agency? Is the narrative and framing of women denying them a meaningful place in the story, trying to make the women less understandable than the male characters? For Haikyu early on, Kiyoko is distanced from the narrative, presented as gorgeous and mysterious to the point of having no clear personality. Yes, there are anime-only moments that sexualize her, but it's in service of the more insidious aspect of the male gaze that pervades her character in its entirety, including the manga content, to make her to be looked at, and not to be understood by the viewers. Frankly, in Season 1, Kiyoko is boring. She's underdeveloped and underutilized. The sexualization is just a symptom of the wasted opportunity of her character. Giving her a shy personality and no particular ongoing story means she feels kind of boring. Meaningless, like she's set dressing. Every anime sports team needs its manager, needs the girl that the boys all have a soft spot for. But what does she add? In Season 1, she really only has a single notable moment where she unfurls the fly banner and gets slightly flustered when she cheers them on. The upperclassman's highly emotional reaction is funny, but she's still not serving a purpose in the broader story. She's a beautiful motivator? That's it. And she motivates all of one time in Season 1. But hey, I thought after Season 1, not every show is perfect, and Kiyoko was one of very few weak spots in Haikyu as a series. However, that judgment was premature, because Season 2 changes everything when it comes to the girls. And it's all thanks to Yachi. Enter Yachi. Yachi joins the show as a cast regular in Season 2. first appearing in the second episode of the season and truly joining the fray in episode 3, which is almost exclusively focused on her. Narratively, Yachi comes in at an interesting moment in Haikyuu's story. The characters have been through the inter-high and lost. The quick discovered by Kageyama and Hinata early on isn't enough to allow them to overcome Seijo, isn't enough for them to make it to nationals. The first half of season 2 is a training arc, where the characters have to grow and change if they want to go any further in the spring tournament. For basically the entire cast, this first half of the season is about changing the status quo and digging into their development. Yachi arrives in the midst of this change, and from a story perspective, the series has the challenge of quickly integrating her into a well-established set of characters, and also demonstrating that she's important enough to warrant messing with the pre-existing lineup. Luckily for Yachi, her only competition in terms of the manager archetype is Kiyoko, who, during season 1, seemed to have the personality of a frying pan. So pretty much any personality whatsoever is a welcome addition. I'll talk a little more about Kiyoko post-season 1 later, but season 2 begins with her searching fervently for a first year to succeed her as volleyball manager. Enter Yachi. In a truly hysterical sequence, Yachi is so transfixed by Kiyoko's beauty that she is barely paying attention to her explanation of the manager role for the volleyball club, and pretty much agrees to try it out unknowingly. Yachi is blushing and flustered in a way that pokes fun at all the guys past fawning. Like, this girl is completely taken aback by Kiyoko's beauty too, and definitely finds her attractive. So much so that she joins a club basically by accident. Yachi is full of personality. She's deeply nervous and jumpy, to the point where she shrieks like 5 times in 2 minutes as she meets the friendly and intimidatingly energetic boys of Karasuno Volleyball. Her nervousness is enhanced by an incredibly wild imagination that runs through scenarios like being stabbed by other girls who are into Kiyoko, Yachi says sapphic rights, or all the boys at the training camp eating her alive on her way to get barbecue, when all they really want to do is help her. Basically, this poor child defaults to the worst-case scenario at all times and is very easily overwhelmed by chaotic situations. Karasuno's team, chaos incarnate most of the time, obviously is not an easy fit for her. She's also very kind and bright and happy to help others, but she needs a bit of a push to fully make that leap when it comes to committing to be the new manager. Some of Yachi's nervousness and doom and glooming make a little more sense once we meet her mom. Yachi's mom is clearly a girl boss. Not even in a meme way, a confident businesswoman who is slightly emotionally insensitive to her daughter's lack of self-esteem. Yachi explained she's been invited to manage the volleyball team, obviously looking for some acknowledgement from her mom about this development, but her mom just asks her, "Do you even know anything about volleyball?" Yachi doesn't, but explains she's going to learn more, and her mom tells her, "That's fine and all, but joining passionate people when you aren't going to give it your all is the rudest thing you could do." Yachi is visibly discouraged. We know from Kiyoko being able to recruit her that she hasn't joined a club yet, and her obvious anxiety suggests that joining a new group or club isn't a straightforward task for her. Yachi's mom's coworker overhears this exchange and calls her mom cold and says the reason that Yachi is a bit negative about these things is likely because of her mom. Her mom explains she just wants Yachi to be stronger. Her mom also says that if what she said makes Yachi give up, Yachi will probably lose hope about even smaller scale stuff in the future. I remember when this episode came out, some people really laid into Yachi's mom for this, which I think isn't totally fair. On the one hand, her mom makes a good point that if 2 sentences from her is going to stop Yachi from joining the club, she isn't really committed at all to it. At some point, Yachi has to make a leap and try something out of her comfort zone of her own free will. On the other hand, one has to wonder if Yachi is so easily deflated and plagued by self-doubt because her mom has put her down or not supported her in the past, as that coworker thought. In which case, it could be a vicious cycle of Yachi's low self-confidence being fed by her mom's harsh comments, leading to Yachi not doing anything outside of her very narrow comfort zone, which invites further harshness from her mom. Still, Yachi's mom does not seem malicious at all. It just seems like their personalities are very much at odds, and they have trouble telling the other what they need to hear. However, Yachi is not alone in making this decision. 2 important moments turn the tide. The first is with Kiyoko, and the second is with Hinata. I'm actually going to analyze the Hinata bit to begin because Kyoko's conversation relates back to what I see Haikyu doing with its female cast as a whole. So Yachi mentions to the team that she's never really done something on her own or had people need her for something, and that even when she did a school play, she was an unnamed townsperson B. Later, when Hinata excitedly asks Yachi if she's going to be their manager after she helps out at the practice game, she flashes back to her mom saying she thinks it's rude to work with passionate people if she can't give it her all. Yachi then says she's just a townsperson B without any knowledge of sports, so she'll get in their way. Hinata exclaims that he was once a townsperson B in a play, and that townsperson B has its own kind of awesomeness. Throughout the episode, Yachi has been helping Kageyama and Hinata study at school, and then in her apartment. When her mom runs into the boys as they leave, they mention the training camp games in Tokyo, which Yachi's mom inquires about after they leave with a skeptical tone. Yachi seems like she's about to say something, but the arrival of the coworker from earlier interrupts her, and her mom has to leave for a meeting. To this coworker's credit, he realized Yachi was about to say something, the prevailing sense being she's going to express her commitment to being a manager, but she deflates. She doesn't have it in her to confront her mom. Hinata goes back to Yachi's apartment after leaving his textbook, and Yachi explains her mom's comment and attitude about the whole thing and asks for his take. He immediately responds with, "You're not going to join over that?" in his oblivious earnestness to the sensitive Yachi. He suggests that Yachi tell her mom what she really feels, eventually sprinting with her to the train station to catch her before she heads to that meeting. Yachi notes that running like this makes her feel like she's in a shoujo manga, which cracks me up considering we are firmly in a shonen, but anyways, she thinks that she has to do this to change and grow, and when they arrive at the station, she sees her mom just about to head down to the platforms. Yachi shouts to stop her, telling the whole station that townsperson B can fight too, and that she's going to be the volleyball club manager, which is so satisfying. And again, on team, Yachi's mom truly means well. She starts crying after Yachi leaves because she's so proud of her. The episode wraps up with Yachi designing a poster to help the club fundraise, with Hinata as the returned little giant, which her mom helps with. I think it's a way of showing that Yachi has her own passions, photography and graphic design, that she brings with her wherever she goes. She also gets a Karasuno volleyball club jacket, which is so sweet. I love her so much. The episode is a great moment of Yachi standing up for herself, helped by Hinata encouraging her, but it's also set up by that conversation with Kiyoko I mentioned. It is not an understatement to say that we learn more about Kiyoko's backstory and outlook on life in this conversation than we learn in the entirety of Season 1. It's set in the changing room as they switch into sweats for after school. Kiyoko is a quiet, slightly deadpan character who we know fairly little about to this point. As Kiyoko undresses, she tells Yachi about how she did play sports before becoming the team's manager, but she didn't know anything about volleyball or management when she joined. While changing, she opens up in a way we haven't ever seen before. Not only is she getting into her volleyball clothes as she talks about how she got involved with volleyball, her words echoing her visual transformation, she's also opening up in this rather intimate moment, undressing with another girl she doesn't know all that well. Importantly, she is not sexualized. The scene's focus is on how she changes clothes and identities, stepping into the world of volleyball. The other focus, the real heart of the scene, is her words to Yachi. "I don't think everyone has to like something before giving it a try," she says. "I don't think you need an unwavering will or lofty motive just to get started. Sometimes things you start on a whim end up becoming very important to you too. To get started, I think you just need a little bit of curiosity." This is antithetical to how the majority of Haikyu main characters, even how the majority of sports anime characters at large, approach their sport of choice. I think it makes sense in a sports show to have your central characters have unwavering, massively intense passion for the sport. If you started Haikyu and Hinata and Kageyama were both like, "Yeah, I don't really feel that strongly about volleyball," a viewer might be like, "Well, I don't know this sport and don't feel strongly about it either. Why am I watching?" Passion is entertaining. We want to root for people who care deeply. Now, most sports shows also explore characters who aren't fired-up sports fanatics, which makes sense, because that's most likely a huge portion of these shows' audiences. And it's also just interesting to vary up these dynamics. Characters who lost that passion as well as those who don't have it at all. For girls and shonen sports anime, I think passion and motivation is an interesting angle to explore. If you were a series about a male sport, you can't have the girls on the team itself. So how do you make supporting characters who feel like they're a valuable part of the story and themes? How are they a part of the journey? Why do they want to be there? Different shows have different approaches to this. Ufuri and Kuriko put a woman in the coach role, which automatically gives them a bigger role and sense of importance in the story. Free, which I'm counting as a sports anime, it's about a sport, gives its manager a connection to the main rival. She's his little sister, which just enhances the drama and also makes her remarkably passionate about the sport and muscles. Haikyu, for its part, just has plain old managers without connections to the main cast, but it gives them depth. Sometimes the things you do on a whim do become incredibly important to you. Sometimes the thing you do doesn't have to be a lifelong passion. It can just be a thing you do and enjoy. It ties back to what I said earlier, that everyone is the center of their own story. That Kiyoko and Yachi's stories feature volleyball, but aren't focused on it. That they get to be a part of this on their own terms. This revelation about how you can find meaning in something you start on a whim, a revelation that somewhat undercuts the main thrust of most shonen protagonists' endless passion, happens between two female characters. It's important that this moment happens here, especially that Kiyoko is the one leading the conversation, because it philosophically leads into how the show restores agency to the women in the cast in Season 2. Yachi's introductory episode is followed by her involvement in the training arc that makes up the first half of Season 2. All the characters are learning and growing, but especially Hinata and Kageyama as they struggle to create a new quick. Yachi sees their frustrations and is eager to help the two of them. So, after one practice, they stay late to try out the new quick approach and get Yachi to toss to Kageyama. When their frustrations explode, she is witness to the fateful, notorious fight between the two of them, where they begin to scream and physically attack one another. Hinata and Kageyama bicker constantly throughout the show, but this is the first real fight they have. It's probably the most intense the show has been up to this point, and Yachi has to run to get Tanaka to break them up. Afterwards, Hinata walks Yachi to her bus stop, apologizes for what happened, and explains his past with Kageyama. How he wanted revenge after middle school, how he felt like they understood each other once they were on the same team, how he wasn't Hinata's first friend, but his first partner. Something that now seems to have shattered. Yachi tears up, and more brutally, we see Hinata crying on his bike ride home. This fracture between the two main characters is really only properly understood by Yachi as the one person there with them and who heard Hinata's insight on their fight. The viewer understands their slow build towards resolution and newfound partnership, not just through Hinata and Kageyama's eyes, but through Yachi's as well. Hinata goes to the old coach Yukai to learn some volleyball basics, Kageyama goes to Oikawa, my fave, for advice, and then the younger coach Yukai helps him some more. Yachi checks in on Hinata a few times, and she watches the pair through the whole training camp. Can they grow enough individually to work together again before the spring tournament? When they train separately, Yachi helps Kageyama perfect his tosses, showing her dedication to both sides of the freak duo since she's closer with Hinata but happily stays late with Kageyama to throw for him. Yachi also can see that they have unwavering faith in the other to get to the point where they can have a new quick, that their anger with one another doesn't prevent respect. When in the last practice match of the training camp they finally manage to perform the new quick, the first person they acknowledge, other than each other in immense excitement, is Yachi, who jumps up and down in delight. They give her a fist bump, as this was her journey too. Yachi's role in this reconciliation and revival is so interesting and so important. When your two main characters have such a brutal fight, physically and emotionally, it's difficult for them to resolve it without other forces helping them get to a point where they can face each other properly again. Yachi, for the both of them, is one of those forces, offering support, trying to figure out where they're each at, and help them get to the place they need to be to work as a freak duo once more. Because she's, 1, new, and 2, a volleyball outsider, her perspective is less clouded by their complicated history and their respective skills. She only sees their hunger to grow and their real desire to work together at their best. Season 2 is about change and evolution, and Yachi is a catalyst and a conduit for that change in the main characters. Hinata and Kageyama would have come to heads eventually, but Yachi helping them practice late pushes them to the brink. And then it's her support and diligence that also brings them back from the edge as they find a way to work together again. I also think she externalizes some of the anguish the two of them are feeling. We see Hinata's silent biking tears, which chokes me up every time, but we never see Kageyama break down. The two of them are visibly tense and frustrated, but anxious being Yachi really channels the height of the worry the two of them must feel, and the worry the audience feels for them. Hinata and Kageyama aren't exactly known for their emotional vulnerability, so I think having someone express tension in a way other than anger is useful for the viewer to fully realize the breadth of feelings involved. Yachi acts as an on-screen surrogate for the fears at play. A bunch of characters are concerned for them, but Yachi is the most constantly and visibly worried. And back to change, a theme not just of Season 2, but really of the whole series, Haikyu posits you cannot grow on your own. You need other people to help you, to bring out the best in you. Volleyball is a team sport. No one plays volleyball alone, as Iwaizumi famously reminded Oikawa. Hinata has the help of the Coach Yukais, of Bokudo, of Yachi. Kageyama has Oikawa and Coach Yukai and Yachi. Yachi is the common thread for the pair of them, one of many who helps them blossom into better players and better friends. It's quite beautiful. From this point in Haikyuu on, Yachi is more on the sidelines of the story, sometimes literally. She's quite involved with Kyoko's arc, which we'll talk about more when I talk about Kiyoko, but otherwise she doesn't have many big moments. She remains a presence on the bench with Yukai and Takada, or in the crowd cheering the team on. She still has her role, but because most of the action is happening on the court, she's less involved. That said, she never feels extraneous. She's a part of this team to the very end. I want to dive into Kiyoko more fully now that Yachi's impact on the story and show has been examined, but first, I want to mention some very minor female characters we meet post-season 1 that are a lot of fun. Haikyu has a massive supporting cast, which I know some people feel overwhelmed by, but I really enjoy. Because with every new team, there's a handful of memorable characters who stay present throughout the series. Even outside the rival teams, though, there are some great supporting characters. Season 2 introduces Psycho Tanaka, Tanaka's elder sister who shares his boisterous, loud energy with a touch more wisdom from life experience. She drives Hinata and Kageyama to the training camp since they have to retake their exams, and she reveals she attended Karasuno a few years ago alongside the little giant, and even encountered him a few times. In a bunch of the matches, she helps drum up morale and also comment on what's going on. She plays the drums, or taiko, and is a part of a drum group that she brings to nationals and helps restore Karasuno's spirit as they play Inarizaki. She's a super fun presence in the stands, and she bonds with a lot of other Karasuno spectators, like Yachi, as well as the neighborhood association guys, Tsukishima's brother, and Akane. Akane is another fun spectator character, the little sister of Nekoma's Yamamoto. She brings a megaphone to matches to cheer on her brother and his team. She sees Psycho as a rival when it comes to cheering, since Nekoma is set to play Karasuno at the end of Season 4, which is adorable. She resembles her brother in her passion and energy, but it's made cuter by her tiny size and youth. Akane is joined by Alisa, Liev's older sister, in rooting for Nekoma. Alisa is super sweet, affectionate, and bubbly. Her friendship with Akane as they root for their brothers is wholesome, and her pride and embarrassment at Liev's volleyball is also charming. These girls are not particularly important to the plot of Haikyu, but they're distinct characters brimming with personality and energy. The world feels fuller for their presence, and it's a better show for their inclusion too. I mentioned her earlier, but Hana Masaki is an excellent female character who gets a very quick and compelling arc in Season 2. I made a 10-minute video on her years ago, which you should absolutely check out, but the short version is this. She's a manager for Jozenji, a team featured in just a few episodes, yet we learn just how much she cares for her team and how her time with them has defined her high school experience. How she, like the rest of them, has fought to come to this gym, to compete in this tournament, and how much she wants them to win. They lose to Karasuno, and we see her take a long last look at the gym, 3 years of her life ending in a single moment. It's quite good. She's quite good. The last major female supporting character I want to mention is Kanoka, Tanaka's childhood best friend and fellow volleyball player who runs into Karasuno at nationals. Her own Miyagi powerhouse school Niyama is highly seeded enough that they don't even have to play the first round at nationals. We meet her in a borderline fan service scene that for me stays on the right side of the creepy versus accurate to teenage boy behavior line. Hinata bumps into Nishinoya, who is shoved towards Kanoka, who is very well endowed. His face is going right for her boobs. In slowed down time, we see him saying this is a lucky perv moment, thanking God for what is happening. If you've watched more than a few anime, you've seen this scene, or a variation of it, where a boy is accidentally pushed into a girl's boobs. Deku and Hatsume in MHA, Kirito and Asuna in SAO, Shinji and Mari in the Evangelion rebuilds, Mikuru in the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, a lot of Kyoto Animation shows actually. Anyway, this is a trope. You see it a lot. Kanaka, an athlete with good reflexes, catches Nishinoya a solid foot from her chest and makes sure he's alright. He is, and that's when Tanaka comes over and reveals he's longtime friends with Kanaka before slowly realizing she is more mature from when they were kids. Suga says how he's realized she's a girl, and seeing how immediately he freezes up, it's easy to tell that his interaction with a friend is very different than how he interacts with girls. I don't think I can in good conscience call Nishinoya thanking God for a chance to land in a girl's boobs tasteful. But, overall, I think this is an example of how Haikyu doesn't deny the inherent horniness you're gonna have with a large group of teenage boys, while also not making their behavior feel horribly uncomfortable. Yes, a teenage boy like Nishinoya probably would enjoy falling into Kanaka, but the show doesn't put her in that position, basically subverting the trope altogether. Also, it's clear that while Nishinoya is gleeful to have this accidentally happen to him, he's not actively trying to violate any girl's boundaries. Again, Inoshida's remark about Tanaka from earlier also applies to Nishinoya. If Shimizu ever told him to stop, he'd probably stop. If a girl was ever visibly uncomfortable by Nishinoya or Tanaka's behavior, or asked them to stop, it feels pretty certain they would immediately leave her alone. As for Tanaka in this scene, it's a pretty realistic depiction of him going from friendly and casual to more awkward once he realizes they're not 8 anymore and that he's attracted to Kanaka. He says she's as huge as ever, which is referring to her height because she's always been super tall, but her boobs are big now, so it's honestly kind of funny to watch Tanaka short circuit. Kanaka has a brief arc with Tanaka. She has a cute crush on him after all these years because he helped her see that her height is an asset, even if people tease her about it. He also introduced her to volleyball, which she loves. Ultimately, he made her feel special for the first time, building her self-belief. Tanaka is mostly in a state of shock and flusteredness, realizing that he actually has a chance with a girl, but before Kanaka can reveal her feelings, her cousin comes over and Tanaka mistakes him for her boyfriend and runs away, having hastily admitted his heart is promised to someone else, aka Kiyoko. Kanaka gets the message despite the abrupt parting, saying her heart may have just been broken. Later, while watching Karasuno's match with Inarizaki, seeing Tanaka take charge of a point after struggling, she is reminded of his straightforward and honest nature, and she repeats that, yeah, she really did have her heart broken. I get it so hard. The episode is basically like, hey, you don't love Tanaka? We will fix that. You will love him. Then at the end, you're like, oh god, I love him. It's good. Haikyuu is so good. I love this show. Despite Tanaka not having interest in her, the two have a lovely moment where Kanaka thanks him for getting her not to slouch anymore, and Tanaka realizes he has to follow her lead in terms of succeeding in volleyball. It's just really sweet watching them reconnect after a decade, and seeing how much they still inspire each other. Not to mention, it's also cool to have a female character who plays volleyball and is honestly on a much higher level than most of the guys on Karasuno's team. There's a few other minor female characters I could mention, but the ones I just talked about have the most prominent roles in the story. The only other girl I'll shout out is Hinata's adorable little sister Natsu, who we see a fair bit of. She is the cutest. Yay for Natsu. Okay, it's Kiyoko time. Kiyoko Shimizu is fundamentally altered in Season 2. The basic outline of her demeanor is the same. She's pretty quiet, usually aloof, but for the first time we see some depth behind that, as well as bits of cheekiness peeking through her calm veneer. First, in recruiting Yachi, Kiyoko shows immense focus and care for managing the team. She seemed to manage things seamlessly in Season 1, but from her intensity in finding a replacement, you can tell just how much the volleyball team means to her. Even with the banner in Season 1, you don't quite get the sense that this is something super close to her heart. More like, she wanted to do something nice and felt a little embarrassed about it. Obviously, she cares, but to what degree is not totally clear. And then, as she describes to Yachi, she's not super passionate about volleyball itself, but it's something that's come to mean a lot to her over the years. After Yachi joins and Kiyoko begins to explain different aspects of the sport and the team to her, it becomes clear just how much attention she pays to the comings and goings of Karasuno's squad, as well as how much she studied volleyball generally. On a more simple level, Yachi just helps Kiyoko relax a little more. She smiles and talks more, to a degree that makes her somewhat unrecognizable from her Season 1 portrayal as the silent sentinel. It's not like there aren't hints that she really is invested in the team. The banner, and even in the opening, this little character animation where we see her tense up as she times something. Logically in Season 1, we know she cares, but we so rarely see it, I didn't feel like she did. A show versus tell thing. I know she should care in my head, but in Season 1, I never felt it in my heart. But through Yachi, I finally felt Kyoko's care in Season 2. And the show continues to build up her character to something more nuanced. In Season 4, we get her best moment. On the first day of Nationals, Hinata and a little boy accidentally swap bags at the warm-up gym, leaving him without his sneakers before their first match of the tournament. He, understandably, is having a nervous breakdown over this, and so is Yamaguchi vicariously. Kageyama asks about Hinata's phone, which is in his bag, and Yamaguchi is able to call it and ask the kid's mom to wait at the gym for someone to come get it. Kiyoko, cool and collected as always, volunteers to go. Yachi says maybe she should go instead, but Kiyoko emphasizes her faith in her own stamina and speed. She also says that Yachi may feel a little lost without her, as Yachi will be acting manager, but she'll need to get used to that anyway. There is a solemn quality to their exchange that underlies the sense of her passing on her role to Yachi. As Kiyoko heads to the warm-up gym, she reflects on how after so much practice as a track athlete, her time in the sport ended abruptly with an injury around the time she started high school. It was then that Daichi asked her if she'd like to be the volleyball club manager, and she accepted without much thought. There hadn't been a manager at Karasuno for a while before Kiyoko, so she had to learn the rules and regulations on her own, but she enjoyed devoting herself to something without having to be on the front lines, as she puts it. Still, she felt distance from the team initially, somewhat on the outside. However, as time went on, the team stopped being just random people to her. After she misses the bus back to the stadium, she starts running to get back in time for the match. She thinks about how she really joined the team on a whim, like she told Yachi, how since the team lacked a manager before her, things would probably just go back to the way they were if she left, and yet she wants to pass this on, to entrust this to someone new. Her track dreams ended suddenly, she thinks. So what? She's not admitting defeat. She doesn't know if her team is going to win, and she's not going to be on the court wearing the uniform as a part of it. But this is a challenge she's taken on. She notes this as she leaps over a railing, just like she used to leap over hurdles in track. This is her battle line. Then, she arrives, tosses down the shoes to Yachi, and the third years raise their fists in tribute to her. These random people who aren't random to her anymore. She returns the fist, and the episode moves right along. Oh, there's so much to unpack! I love this whole sequence. This is the moment where I finally got Kiyoko, where I fully enjoyed her character without hesitation. How do you make a manager character who inherently has to be someone on the outside of your sport feel like they really need to be there? Kiyoko is someone who had a passion, just like our main characters, but because of an injury out of her control, she can't pursue it anymore. This doesn't torture her. She's moved on. She's found that there is meaning in other things she started on a whim. She's carved out a role for herself at Karasuno, with the people she's come to value as friends and teammates. It's something she made and developed herself. It's something so precious to her that after all these years, she feels the need to hand it off to someone. One thing I think that shonen generally, but especially sports shonen, overemphasize is the idea that there is one thing that's your destiny or your passion or your life. And if you can't have that one thing, you're not going to be happy or fulfilled. But life isn't like that. You're going to be okay if you don't become Hokage, or the #1 hero, or win the spring tournament, Hinata. In fact, you're going to be okay if tomorrow you shatter your ankle and can't play volleyball ever again, because you'll find new ways to create meaning and feel accomplished. Your job, your hobbies, your passions are a part of your life. They're not your whole life. They're subject to change and they grow and evolve with you. And that's good. The ending of something is only the beginning of something else. And really, Kiyoko is one of the only characters the story can use to express this idea, because she's a manager. She's not central to the sport. She can explore the complex realities of passion and shifting tides of life. Hinata, Kageyama, Kema, Oikawa, Yoshijima, Bokuto, Atsumu, anyone who is on the court, their arcs need to be about their relationship to volleyball. Otherwise, why bother watching them play? Their development often connects to broader points about struggle and talent and passion, but it has to be rooted in volleyball. Kiyoko doesn't have this restriction. Her distance from the heart of the story allows this nuance. This approach is such a refutation of her treatment in Season 1, where her distance from the main cast seemed to only serve her being more appealing eye candy. At Nationals, that distance, her role as a young woman and manager in a male-dominated series, is utilized specifically by the narrative to great success. It's okay that Kiyoko's dreams of a track career ended because of her injury. Managing the volleyball team tapped into her love for sports and also gave her something to dedicate to herself when she needed it. It helped her make wonderful friends, wonderful memories, and then, after she graduates, she may still love volleyball, but she'll find new parts of her future she doesn't even know yet. This is her battle line at Nationals. Tomorrow, where will it be? She doesn't know yet. And that's exciting. This is just so well done, and is so redemptive for Season 1 Kiyoko. Like, can you imagine her saying, "This is my battle line right now"? I just can't. In Kiyoko's reflection on the team, she describes the sensation of her teammates turning from random strangers to people she actually cares about, as I mentioned. The flashback seems to illustrate this switch happening after the spring tournament last year. I'm dating this moment based on this guy, who's named Kurokawa, but who I call Sickly Victorian Child Guy because he looks dehydrated and exhausted. Anyway, Sickly Victorian Child Guy is 1 year above the current third years, so this would be Kiyoko's second year. For me, it feels like the switch actually happened between Season 1 and Season 2. After their loss at the Inner High, with the impending need to find a successor, maybe Kiyoko started to care a lot more. We get further perspectives on this during a scene with her and Yachi at Nationals where they take a bath together. Yachi says she's so nervous when the two of them are alone together. It's text that Yachi is overwhelmed by Kiyoko's beauty, finding her very sexy and beautiful. And it's subtext that she has a bit of a crush on her. So when she tries to make conversation, asking why Kiyoko wears tights with her summer uniform, when Kiyoko takes a long pause before answering, Yachi attempts to run away, but Kiyoko finally gets to tell her that she has a lot of scars on her legs from hurdling in track. Yachi calls them badges of honor, and she, of course, immediately apologizes for comparing it to a battlefield. But Kiyoko says it makes her happy, and adds she's never been very social, and Yachi is the first person she's really been able to talk to like this. This takes place the night before the first match, so when Kiyoko talks about her battle line later, it actually evokes this conversation, which is very cool. As a brief aside, an interesting observation I had is that Kiyoko's biggest moments of vulnerability are both with Yachi and when they're in states of undress. The changing room for her perspective on joining as a manager, and then in the bath as she talks about her scars from hurdling. Neither instance sexualizes the girls. In fact, the nakedness in the bath is only really played for laughs when Yachi attempts to flee initially. Since Kiyoko discusses her tights as a way to hide her scars, it's interesting to think about her clothes and uniform as a barrier that keeps her closed off. They literally cover her past scars, and it's only in spaces with Yachi where she is allowed to take them off that she shares something deeper about herself. Now, if Yachi is really one of Kiyoko's first friends that she can open up to, then maybe her presence is key to this switch in how she approaches the team. The attachment she has to the team finally rises to the surface after being submerged for so long, because Yachi is there to help her come out of her shell. I feel a little conflicted about this. Mostly because it seems weird to me that Kiyoko wouldn't have anybody to open up after 3 years in high school. Surely, some of the girls in the class would reach out and attempt to befriend her, right? High school is brutal, I get that, but even so, it's a little weird to me. Unless she really can't interact at all with anyone, I'm sort of surprised she didn't at least have a couple people she could chat with. It's tricky in sports anime because the story is usually focused on after school. Usually you don't get a strong sense of what goes on during the school day, but I don't know. I thought she'd maybe have some more friends. If you told me Kageyama doesn't really have buddies outside of volleyball, that would make sense because he's a bit of a one-track mind and very awkward. Kiyoko is shy, but her life isn't just volleyball, so I sort of assume that maybe her quietness was because she has other people she talks to. But then, as she talks about how she feels like she can open up to Yachi, it seems like she doesn't really have any other friends. So, I don't know. On the other hand, I really love Kiyoko and Yachi's relationship, and how much it means to the both of them. You may have heard of the Bechdel test, which cartoonist Alison Bechdel came up with in her comic strip Dykes to Watch Out For. The test asks if a film has at least 2 women in it who talk to each other about something other than a man. Failing the test doesn't mean something isn't good, but the number of films that fail speaks to how the simple act of women in a story having relationships with one another is surprisingly lacking in a lot of media. This is true in a lot of shonen too. Again, usually you don't have more than one central female character, and she's usually the love interest, so the odds of her having a deep relationship with another female cast member that isn't primarily based on them talking about a male main character, it's rarer than you'd think. Serialized television means that usually, at some point, the characters will talk about something other than boys. But when I think about Uraraka's relationship with someone like Sue or Mina in MHA, for example, a lot more of their recent interactions relate to them teasing her about her crush on Deku. That's not inherently a bad thing, but it's not as interesting as some other aspects of their friendship could be, particularly if those aspects aren't getting explored anymore. To compare with a sports show, Kuroko no Basket has Riko, the coach for Seirin, who is cool on her own, but her relationship with other women is usually framed by the fact she has small boobs. So, when she sees ladies who are well endowed, she's flustered that she has a small chest. Which, isn't technically talking about a man, but it certainly caters to male interests by focusing all of these interactions on breasts. Yachi and Kiyoko have a relationship built on their connection as managers, on Kyoko's encouragement to Yachi to embrace trying new things, even if they aren't lifelong passions, on Yachi's energetic outlook that allows Kiyoko to feel comfortable around her. Yachi is eager to help Kiyoko and be her friend, even though she's a bit anxious around her. And Kiyoko wants to help Yachi be ready to succeed her and be her friend too. It's a heartwarming, natural friendship that feels critical to the growth of both girls. Along with some other outstanding female friendships in anime, Kiyoko and Yachi's dynamic is a favorite of mine. So, I definitely think that Kiyoko underwent some retooling as the story went on to make her feel like an actual member of Karasuno, to give her a real friendship, and I'm glad for it. Her sequence picking up the shoes at Nationals is such a unique, perceptive take on how eras of your life begin and end unexpectedly, and how life always goes on. And for this subgenre that usually channels teenage fervor and the short term of high school sports, it's an insightful monologue with a wider perspective on life. Plus, Kiyoko has a variety of really nice moments in the later seasons. She goes with her fellow third years to visit a shrine on New Year's Day, and states that they don't need the help of the gods to win their matches, in a moment that very sweetly reassures the other seniors. Evaluating her character as a whole, I think where she ended is great. And usually, this would be the part where I give my conclusion on her character, and the female characters as a whole, and then we'd all go home. But I can't do that, because I've read the Haikyu manga, and I know how Kyoko's story ends, and I have many feelings about it. So, I'm now going to talk about manga spoilers. I'm going to purposely try to talk lightly about non-Kiyoko related spoilers because, look, I know some of you have already read the Haikyu manga. Those of you may pass freely beyond this point. But if you haven't, I am begging you, go read the manga. Go read what hasn't been adapted yet. Seriously. The final arc of the Haikyu manga is my favorite in the series. It's not at all what you expect, and yet it's a perfect conclusion. And I wouldn't beg you to read it or even spoil it at all if it was going to be animated properly. But Haikyu isn't getting a season 5. It's instead getting 2 movies to animate the conclusion, which... These 2 movies are going to cover over 100 chapters. For reference, Season 1 of Haikyu adapts 71 chapters across 25 episodes. Season 2 adapts 78 chapters across 25 episodes. Season 3 adapts 41 chapters across 10 episodes. And Season 4 adapts 85 chapters across 25 episodes. If each movie is a full 3 hours, which would be a total of 15 episodes of content, it would still be adapting at a far faster pace than season 3, almost double the rate. And 3-hour-long movies are not going to happen. The longest anime movie ever, which I have seen and recommend, is In This Corner of the World, and it's only 2 hours 48 minutes. And the longest feature film from Production IG, the studio that makes Haikyu, was only 2 hours and 2 minutes. They're gonna cut stuff in these movies, and it's all good stuff, so they're gonna cut really good stuff. All this to say, to enjoy the story at its fullest, you should read the manga. I hate to be that person too, because I rarely read the manga, I'm almost always an anime only, but just knowing this adaptation can't get to it all, I will make my hypocritical plea. Read it. Manga reader tangent over. Spoiler time! After the end of the spring tournament, Haikyu has a massive time skip several years into the future. We soon see Hinata debut in the professional volleyball league in Japan after having played beach volleyball in Brazil for several years. At his debut match, there are many familiar players on both sides of the court, most notably Kageyama as one of his opponents, and even more friendly faces show up to watch and support their friends, including Kiyoko, with Tanaka. Because they got married. She's not Shimizu Kiyoko. She's Tanaka Kiyoko. I have very mixed feelings about this. Like, so mixed. I feel the need to chart the history of Tanaka and Kiyoko's interactions to show you why it doesn't feel particularly earned and really feels like a strange ending for Kiyoko specifically. So, throughout the first 4 seasons of Haikyu, we see that Tanaka is a devoted fan of Kiyoko's, scaring off other guys with Nishinoya and constantly looking to help or impress her. Tanaka, from his very first interaction with her, asks to carry her bag, which she declines. Later in Season 4, during Tanaka's arc that features Kaneka as we discussed earlier, we see that when he met Kiyoko as a first year, in a shoujo-worthy, white, sparkly, glowing haze, he immediately asked her to marry him. Kiyoko, after seemingly considering it for a moment with beautiful comedic timing, says no. So, from Tanaka's side, there's been steady and constant interest in her, even to the point that he turns down poor Kaneka because his heart is set on another. But what about Kiyoko's side? Well, up until that Tanaka arc, there's not much. She rejects his advances every time, and she sees him with a banana once and compares him to a monkey. During his arc, Tanaka has an incredible spike that wins the first set against Inarizaki for Karasuno. Takeda expresses relief, saying he didn't know what was going to happen for a moment. Kiyoko calmly explains that Tanaka usually makes it through okay. In the point itself, she appears focused but calm, much like Kaneka is. They also appear in parallel, shots back to back with a similar angle. Her line to Takeda seems to mirror a similar faith in Tanaka's abilities that Kaneka has. It certainly frames her as another love interest for him. Although, in terms of actual feelings from Kiyoko's side, her expression of faith in his talents feels like something she would say about most of the team. They only have one more moment before they get married. This one hasn't been animated yet. At the end of Nationals, as Karasuno leaves the stadium, Tanaka offers to carry Kiyoko's bag, and she agrees. He notes that it's light, and she says that's what she's always said. To me, this feels like a nice note to end their dynamic on. Kiyoko, after her final match as manager, letting Tanaka help her, as he has been so eager to do since he first met her. But then, they are married? Like, huh? Tanaka meets Kiyoko, proposes marriage, is rejected literally hundreds of times over the next 2 years. Kiyoko expresses faith in his volleyball talents once, and then agrees to let him carry her bag once, and then they get married. It's not like there aren't any moments where Kiyoko seems to at least think of Tanaka positively, because we've got those 2 big ones, but it seems like a massive leap for them to be married when we see them next, with no explanation as to how they got together after high school. Haikyu is a series that, by and large, sets up almost everything it does well. That doesn't mean there aren't things that happen that take you by surprise. For example, the time skip is a bit of a shock, but what Hinata gets out of Brazil and beach volleyball makes sense with his goals and his passion that we've seen across the whole series. And his eventual return to indoor volleyball in Japan and all his friends is so wonderful. Thematically, emotionally, even if the path the story took was unexpected, everything clicked into place. Kiyoko and Tanaka getting married feels like an exception to that. If Kiyoko had shown even a bit more interest in Tanaka before the final arc, it might have felt like a natural continuation for them to get married many years on. Instead, Kiyoko never showed any romantic interest, just pleasant, platonic appreciation. So it feels weird and disappointing, honestly, that she gets together with Tanaka, who I do love and is a genuinely good guy. I'm sure you've seen movies or shows where it feels like a girl who is doggedly pursued by a guy she rejects, gets worn down over time, and eventually agrees to go out with him. Kiyoko and Tanaka aren't as bad as some things I've seen in that vein, but it does remind me of that sort of trope, and I don't particularly enjoy seeing a girl basically surrender to a guy's affections without having much active development. Now, when we do see them as a couple, they seem very happy together. Kiyoko is grinning way more than we have ever seen, and she isn't wearing tights anymore and tells Yachi her scars are badges of honor. It seems like she grew even more open and confident than she was in season 4. It's really touching seeing Kiyoko so visibly happy and bright, but it's just shocking and comes out of nowhere when she used to be constantly quiet. All her development was about herself, about the way she can find joy and meaning in new hobbies and friendships. It's not impossible to imagine her finding joy in a new romantic relationship, but that's not the kind of growth we saw from her. To be fair, I know people are capable of a lot of change after high school. Maybe her environment and even her relationship with Tanaka, who was always high energy, helped her be confident and happy. But I'd like to have seen that, or at least seen the beginnings of that on screen, instead of assuming it happened somewhere I didn't see. If we had a few more moments with Tanaka and her, maybe some internal monologue from Kiyoko talking about how things end suddenly and new things begin suddenly, but looking directly at Tanaka, maybe we could make that leap so their marriage makes sense. As is, I can't see it. Haikyu doesn't focus largely on romance. The only other romance of note is between Daisho, captain of Nohebi Academy who played Nekoma during Tokyo's regionals, and his girlfriend Mika. We learned she broke up with him because he was so focused on volleyball, but after watching their match, she says she has begun to understand and admire his devotion to the sport, and they get back together. They go watch nationals together. It's fairly sweet. Nothing particularly noteworthy, but it's unique for a series that has a lot of meaningful friendships and relationships, but almost zero romance. Now, I feel like it'd be dishonest not to mention that the fandom often interprets several of these close dynamics as romantic, myself included. You gotta stop swearing to keep challenging each other to be the best for the rest of your life. If you stop making these dramatic fist bumps and promise to chase after one another forever and ever, then maybe I could be like, oh yeah, they're just friends. But when you make a lifelong oath that you actually keep, because we see into the future when the time skip happens, you gotta stop monologuing about each other, come on! But yeah, in canon, Mika and Daisho and Kiyoko and Tanaka are all we get. Plus one not yet animated couple in the Brazil arc who I really do like. Haikyu is clearly not interested in romance as a central plot device, and I think it shows when these two characters get married off screen and it feels a little random. So, to sum up, I feel mixed about it. I like that Kiyoko seems to be super happy with Tanaka. They look cute, but I don't like that we have very little foreshadowing or indication she had any romantic interest in him. It also bothers me because, just like Kyoko's anime introduction, this is the note we leave her on. Suddenly married to a guy she has no interest in. It feels like Kyoko's middle characterization is solid, but her first few and her last few appearances are on shaky ground. So, what's the verdict? The Haikyu girls are good. Mostly. Kiyoko is where the show fails the most, but even in her case, she is given a wonderful and thoughtful story moment. Otherwise, Yachi and most of the supporting women shine brightly in an already fantastic cast of characters. They're given meaningful development and friendships that elevate Haikyuu's storytelling. To end though, I want to talk about why it's important that Haikyuu has these great female characters in the context of shonen anime as a whole. One criticism I saw lobbed at my MHA video, and I think a criticism that anime fans generally raise when you criticize the treatment of women in shonen, is that shonen is targeted at boys and young men. It's not for girls. Therefore, why should we care about the constant fan service or developing complex female characters? To that, I would first say that I actually think having interesting, thoughtful female characters in a series aimed at boys is important just because boys should be exposed to fiction that shows girls leading as rich inner lives as guys. That girls are not inferior or inherently sexual beings. That guys should treat and approach the opposite gender with respect and understanding. I'd say the same is true of boys in shoujo, but I don't think they are as often grossly sexualized or sidelined. In large part because they are often presented as love interest in a romance-focused story, so their development is important to the narrative. Girls are often love interest in shonen too, but those stories aren't usually romance-focused, so you have to go out of your way to develop them outside a romantic context. Haikyu, Kiyoko and Tanaka's marriage aside, is really thoughtful about this, giving the girls depth as people. Second, and I may make a video fully diving into this topic at some point, the demographics of shonen are shifting. In 2012, Weekly Shonen Jump, the magazine where many of the most popular manga are published, provided some interesting statistics about its readers. This chart shows the gender breakdown of readers of different series. Haikyuu's audience was notably 66% female. More girls are reading it than guys. And that doesn't just apply to Haikyuu. Gintama, Hitman Reborn, Kuroko no Basket, and even One Piece and Bleach were read by more female readers than male readers. For One Piece and Bleach, it's very nearly 50-50. But it's undeniable that even though these stories are aimed at a male demographic, they have a huge appeal for girls and are consumed by a lot of young women. Now, Haikyuu started in 2012, which was over a decade ago, oh my lord, but we have more recent numbers to attest to its appeal for female readers. In 2020, 72% of the people who bought the newly released volume 43 of Haikyuu in Japan were women. Interestingly, the article reporting on this also notes that Golden Cowboy and Jujutsu Kaisen had about even 50-50 female-male readership. So shonen definitely holds massive appeal for women, and relies on the support of its female readers, who are buying Weekly Shonen Jump and volumes of manga. For Haikyuu specifically, from its beginnings, it had a majority female audience. And by its end, the series definitely had huge appeal to women if over 2/3 of the audience were female, at least going off the huge initial sales for the second to last volume. On top of an excellent story that would appeal to anyone, the thoughtful female characters may have played a big part in young women growing to love this series. Why should we care about women in Haikyuu and women in sports anime and women in shonen? Because women are reading it. A lot of women are reading it. No matter the target audience, the actual audience is not just men. I think these discussions deserve to happen because women are a massive part of any of these series' followings. If a show's treatment of its female characters is going to make 50% of its audience feel excluded or uncomfortable, that treatment is worth discussing. And on the other hand, if a show's treatment of female characters makes 50% to 66% to 72% of the audience feel seen by the narrative, then that's worth celebrating. If you truly love a piece of media, you should engage with it on all levels, with your love for it on one hand and with a critical eye on the other. I have thought about Haikyuu way too much to have never thought about its shortcomings. The series has flaws outside of Kyoko's often weak characterization, but I can acknowledge those and still love Haikyuu for what it does so well. For shouting at me that townsperson B can also fight. For showing me that my battle line can be anywhere I want it to be. For reminding me that things I start on a whim, like say a YouTube channel I created on a snow day when I was in high school, can end up becoming very important to me too. Hello! Thank you for watching this very, very, very long video. I'd apologize for the wait, but honestly, this turnaround is decent for me. I've had longer breaks between videos, and this one is sprawling. So yeah. I can't say whether I'm going to be one of those YouTubers that does super long videos because they take a long time to write and longer to edit, but with topics like female characters and shows like Haikyu where I just love it so much, I find I have a lot to say. The odds are if you're here, you probably joined my channel with my MHA video, which is awesome. Thank you so much for hopping on the LadyIneia train. Hope you enjoyed the ride thus far. For any older pals, hope you liked returning to the Haikyuu analysis after many years of other shows. And for new friends, please subscribe. It's a good old time. My only real announcement is that I have started a Ko-fi. I am not consistent enough to do a Patreon, but a Ko-fi I think is a cool option for anyone who's inclined to directly support me. It's basically a tip jar. So if you watched this video, or my MHA video, or an older video, and thought, man, I really liked that, and want to support that channel, you can buy me a Ko-fi and toss a couple bucks in the jar. I will give you a shout out at the end of the next video if you do. So, woo! I actually got a Ko-fi before this video even came out from someone who found the link on my YouTube page, so I'm giving them an extra special shout out as my first ever Ko-fi. Thank you to Cookie so much for supporting me. It means a lot. I looked at their page, and Cookie has a webtoon called The Cupid Test, which you should check out. It's funny, with a really great cast of characters. Thank you again, Cookie. So, since I did my initial recording for the voiceover, I actually got 2 more donations, so I wanted to shout out those people since they did donate before this video came out. The first is Shaughnessy TV, thank you so much, and also at Kiba. Thank you both so much for supporting the channel. All right, I also have a secret meme ending for the people who are watching to the end, because 5% of the people made it to the end of the MHA video, and 11% to the end of the Food and Yuri on Ice. People are sticking around. I love to see it, and I reward you with a secret ending. Sending you love, dear viewer. Until next time.
もしもその瞬間が来たら、それがお前がバレエにハマる瞬間だ。